Maya Collins was 26 when her life narrowed to survival. 3 years earlier, her small neighborhood bakery had failed quietly, not with scandal or debt collectors, but with empty mornings and unsold bread. She had packed up her mixes, sold what she could, and moved into her sister Danielle Price's house in Madison, telling herself it would be temporary. Danielle had 4 children and worked irregular night shifts, and Maya believed helping for a few months would give her time to recover. Months turned into years. Before I continue, I need to ask you for a favor. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly makes a difference. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps keep this channel alive and these stories coming. The house never slowed. Maya became the person who woke first and slept last, the one who learned every school schedule, every allergy, every fear that surfaced after midnight. She did not call herself their parent, but the role followed her anyway. Danielle thanked her often, usually in passing, usually while rushing out the door. "I don't know how I'd do this without you," she'd say, already distracted. Maya held onto those words longer than she should have. They became the excuse she used when her own life stayed on pause. Every weekday began before sunrise. Maya moved through the kitchen on instinct, packing lunches while the coffee cooled untouched beside her. 15-year-old Ethan argued with his sister Sophie over cereal, their voices sharp with half-sleep and irritation. Owen spilled juice and tried to laugh it off. 6-year-old Lucis stood barefoot in the hallway, clutching Maya's leg and asking for her hair to be braided the way Maya always did it. By the time they were in the car, Maya's shoulders already ached. The drive to school was loud and chaotic, but predictable, and predictability was the only thing holding the household together. After drop-off, Maya went straight to her part-time job at a coffee shop downtown, where she smiled on command and moved fast enough to keep customers from complaining. The pay barely covered gas and her phone bill, but quitting wasn't an option. When her shift ended, she picked the kids up, supervised homework, cooked dinner, and broke up arguments that flared from exhaustion rather than malice. Danielle was usually asleep or already gone for work. Jason Miller, Danielle's boyfriend, was present just enough to remind Maya she was not alone, yet somehow always unavailable. At night, when the house finally quieted, Maya opened her laptop at the kitchen table and logged into her graphic design classes. The screen glowed against the dark, tutorials playing softly as she tried to stay awake. Design had always been her second dream, something she loved before the bakery consumed her time. She imagined working for herself again, creating logos and branding instead of steaming milk for strangers. But most nights, her concentration slipped. Deadlines passed. Emails from instructors piled up unanswered. Once, Sophie wandered in and asked why Maya looked so tired. "Just catching up," Maya said, forcing a smile. Sophie hugged her without another word. The moment stayed with Maya long after the girl went back to bed. She loved the children deeply, but love did not erase the cost. She had spent most of her remaining savings on school supplies, medical copays, and asthma medication for Lucy. Danielle contributed when she could, but money vanished as fast as it arrived. Jason never offered. When Danielle called Maya amazing with the kids, it sounded less like praise and more like permission to disappear. The realization came slowly, then all at once. Maya was not overwhelmed because the children were difficult. She was overwhelmed because she was carrying responsibilities that were never meant to be hers alone. She tracked hours one afternoon, writing everything down. 10 hours a day managing the house. 6 at work. 3 on school when she could stay awake. Sleep became something she borrowed in short bursts. Her sketchbook, once full of bold ideas, held only quick drawings for Lucy or notes for Ethan's school projects. When she called her best friend Jordan Reed and admitted she was drowning, Jordan didn't soften the truth. "You're allowed to want your own life," she said. "Helping doesn't mean disappearing." Maya hung up and stared at the kitchen around her. Nothing in it belonged to her, yet she held it together. The imbalance was impossible to ignore once she named it. Staying meant losing herself entirely. Leaving meant hurting people she loved. The choice felt cruel either way. The breaking point arrived one evening when Danielle came home energized, her mood unusually bright. Jason followed her in, carrying takeout like a trophy. Danielle announced she was pregnant again, smiling as if the house had not already been stretched thin. Maya congratulated her automatically, but her stomach tightened. Later, over dinner, Danielle's tone shifted. She spoke as if the decision had already been made. "With the baby coming," she said, "we need you here more. Maybe full-time with the kids. You could quit the coffee shop." Jason nodded. adding that money was tight and asking if Maya could contribute rent. The words landed heavily. Maya set her fork down. She explained, calmly, that she was already doing everything she could and that quitting her job would leave her with nothing. Danielle's patience vanished. "You live here," she said sharply. "You owe us." The room fell quiet. Maya stood, her hand shaking, and left the table without another word. That night, alone in her room, she made a decision she could not undo. She would move out. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Staying was no longer an option. Maya did not announce her decision. She moved quietly for days, observing how easily Danielle assumed she would give in. Lists of chores appeared on the fridge. Doctor appointments were mentioned in passing, as if already assigned. Jason suggested she sell her old bakery equipment to help the household. Maya answered less and listened more. She began to see the pattern clearly. Every request framed as necessity, every refusal treated as betrayal. The house felt different once she stopped absorbing the pressure. The children noticed first. Ethan watched her closely, his questions sharper than before. Sophie stayed near her, helping without being asked. Owen kept asking what day it was, counting toward something he didn't understand. Lucifer followed Maya everywhere, sensing change without words. One night, after everyone was asleep, Maya opened her laptop and searched for studio apartments. The numbers were frightening but possible. She still had just enough savings left from the bakery, barely enough for a deposit and 1 month if she lived carefully. Fear crept in, but relief followed. For the first time in years, the future belonged to her again. Jordan was the first person Maya told. They sat in Jordan's car outside the coffee shop, the engine idling while rain tapped the windshield. "They are asking you to disappear," Jordan said flatly. "That's not family. That's convenience." Maya nodded, gripping her cup. She felt guilty even considering leaving, but guilt no longer felt like a reason to stay. At home, Danielle's patience thinned as Maya stopped volunteering for extra tasks. Arguments followed. Danielle accused her of being selfish. Jason muttered about loyalty and teamwork. Maya refused to engage. She redirected her energy into planning. She mapped budgets, calculated hours, and accepted that comfort would be replaced by control. One afternoon, she toured a small studio near downtown Madison. It was cramped, plain, and quiet. The landlord quoted the rent without ceremony. Maya didn't hesitate. She imagined her desk by the window, her laptop open without interruption. It wasn't luxury. It was space. She signed the paperwork 2 days later, knowing there would be consequences, but choosing herself anyway. Telling the children was the hardest part. Maya started with Ethan, sitting across from him at the kitchen table after school. "I'm moving out," she said. He looked down, then back up, anger flashing briefly across his face. "Because of Mom," he said. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded. "I need to live my own life," she said. "That doesn't mean I'm leaving you." Ethan didn't respond right away, but he listened as she showed him how to plan simple meals and track Luce's inhaler. Sophie overheard and cried quietly in her room, asking if it was her fault. Maya held her and told her the truth. Owen asked who would help with science projects. Lucy asked if Maya would still braid her hair. Maya promised visits, calls, consistency. She didn't promise more than she could give. That mattered. The children were hurt, but they understood more than Danielle ever expected. Maya moved out on a Tuesday morning while the kids were at school. She packed lightly, leaving behind anything that could be mistaken for theft. Her new studio smelled like fresh paint and silence. She slept on a mattress on the floor that night, exhausted but steady. 3 days later, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "This is Officer Thomas with the Madison Police Department," the voice said. Maya's chest tightened. Danielle had reported her for theft and property damage. Maya drove back immediately. 2 officers stood on the porch while Danielle gestured angrily, listing accusations that unraveled under inspection. Officer Nguyen examined the so-called damage and noted old wear. Ethan stepped forward, voice firm, and told the truth. The officers dismissed the report with a warning. Danielle said nothing. Maya hugged Ethan outside, stunned by his courage. Driving home, she realized something final had shifted. Danielle was willing to destroy her rather than let her go. There would be no safe return. Maya kept her distance after that. She checked on the children through texts and short visits, careful never to be alone with Danielle. Her studio slowly transformed into a workspace. Sketches returned. Ideas flowed again. The guilt didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. Then, 2 weeks later, Ethan called. Danielle was in the hospital with complications from the pregnancy. The children were scared. Maya sat in her car for a long time before turning the key. She knew helping again carried risk. But this time, she would not disappear. She drove to the hospital and spoke with Dr. Anika Shah, who explained the need for strict bed rest. When Danielle asked for help, Maya agreed with conditions. She would keep her job, keep her apartment, and help only for the children, for a limited time. Danielle accepted, exhausted and cornered. As Maya walked back into the house that night, she felt something new. Not obligation. Control. This time, she was choosing how much of herself to give, and how much to keep. Maya's return came with rules, and she enforced them from the start. She drove to Danielle's house after her coffee shop shifts, stayed long enough to cook dinner, check homework, and stabilize the evening, then left before midnight. She did not sleep there. When Danielle complained, Maya reminded her calmly, "This is temporary, and it's for the kids." Ethan absorbed the change fastest. He stepped into responsibility without being asked, learning to manage laundry schedules and grocery lists with quiet focus. Sophie hovered near Maya whenever she visited, eager but restrained, as if afraid to ask for too much. Owen oscillated between cheerfulness and sudden frustration, while Lucy clung harder than ever, testing whether Maya would vanish again. Jason remained distant, offering excuses instead of effort. He spent more time in the garage or at work, avoiding the tension he helped create. Maya noticed everything but commented on nothing. She was no longer there to fix adults. She was there to protect children from collapse, and only just enough to do that. The house deteriorated in subtle ways. Dishes piled up faster. Bills went unopened. Jason's presence shrank until he barely acknowledged the kids. One evening, Lucy cried herself to sleep after Jason missed her school play. "He said he'd come," she whispered. Maya held her, anger steady and cold. Ethan saw it all. One night, while Maya helped Owen with math, Ethan admitted he was scared, not just for the baby, but for what came after. "She never comes back the same," he said quietly. Maya didn't lie to him. She told him the truth adults rarely give children. "You can't control her choices," she said. "But you can learn how to survive them." The words felt heavy, but Ethan nodded. He was already doing more than most adults in the house. Maya made sure he wasn't doing it alone. By the second month, Danielle's condition stabilized, but nothing else improved. Jason's absences grew longer. When he finally packed a bag and left without explanation, no one was surprised. Danielle cried, blamed everyone else, and sank deeper into resentment. Maya stayed out of it. She kept her visits efficient and predictable. She taught Sophie how to plan school assignments, showed Owen how to organize his backpack, and reminded Lucy that she was loved, even when the adults failed her. At home, in her studio, Maya worked late into the night on design projects she had nearly abandoned. A classmate connected her with a small business that needed branding. The job paid modestly, but it paid. One client led to another. Her confidence returned slowly, built on proof instead of hope. She was exhausted, but it was the good kind, the kind that came from building something, not holding something together that wanted to fall apart. 3 months passed. Danielle was discharged with her newborn son and a list of instructions she barely read. Maya came over one final time, helped organize the house, and sat across from Danielle at the kitchen table. "I'm done," she said evenly. "I love the kids, but I won't keep doing this." Danielle accused her of abandonment, of selfishness, of betrayal. Maya didn't argue. She had learned that defending herself only fed the cycle. She hugged the children one by one. Ethan held on longer than the others. Sophie slipped a folded drawing into Maya's bag. Owen promised to call. Lucy cried, then wiped her face with determination that broke Maya's heart. Leaving was not clean, but it was necessary. Some endings were allowed to hurt. Maya did not disappear. She stayed connected through Jordan, who lived nearby and agreed to be a buffer between the children and Danielle's volatility. Maya sent small amounts of money when she could, called regularly, and showed up for school events when invited. She never went back to the house. Her freelance work grew steadily, until one month she earned more than she ever had at the coffee shop. She quit without ceremony. Her studio filled with sketches, color palettes, and quiet pride. Danielle's life unraveled slowly, predictably, but Maya refused to be pulled back in. She had learned the cost of sacrificing herself for someone who would never carry the weight in return. When Maya closed her laptop one night, Satisfied with her work, she understood something clearly at last. She had not failed her family. She had finally stopped failing herself. Distance gave Maya perspective. Without the constant noise of Danielle's house, she could finally see how deeply she had normalized dysfunction. The late-night demands, the guilt disguised as gratitude, the expectation that she would always absorb the damage, none of it had been accidental. It had worked because Maya had allowed it to. That awareness stung, but it also strengthened her resolve. She stopped answering messages that carried accusations instead of information. When Danielle called to complain, Maya redirected the conversation to the children or ended it altogether. Boundaries were not dramatic, they were consistent. Jordan noticed the change immediately. "You're calmer," she said one afternoon while they reviewed a draft logo together. Maya smiled. Calm had once felt impossible. Now it felt earned. The children adapted in their own ways. Ethan grew quieter but more focused, pouring his energy into school and taking pride in small victories. Sophie sent Maya photos of her sketches, asking for feedback, her confidence growing with each reply. Owen called to announce milestones with breathless excitement. Lucy still struggled most, asking questions that had no satisfying answers. Maya learned how to comfort without overpromising, how to be present without becoming the solution to every problem. She visited when Jordan was there, keeping interactions stable and predictable. The children didn't need rescuing. They needed reliability. Maya could give them that without giving up herself. Danielle, meanwhile, spiraled quietly. She lost her call center job after missing too many shifts and blamed the pregnancy, the breakup, the lack of support. Neighbors stopped stepping in. Friends stopped answering. When word reached Maya through Jordan, she felt a familiar pull of responsibility, and let it pass. Helping Danielle had never fixed anything. It had only delayed the consequences. Maya focused instead on what she could control. She accepted a contract with a local startup, then another. Her designs sharpened. Clients returned. She began saving again, slowly but steadily. The fear that once ruled her decisions faded, replaced by something sturdier, trust in her own judgment. One evening, Maya hosted Jordan in her studio. They ordered takeout, laughed, and talked about future projects. The walls were covered in work she was proud of. No one interrupted. No one needed anything from her except her presence. Later, after Jordan left, Maya sat alone and thought about the version of herself who had believed survival required self-erasure. That woman had been strong, but she had been trapped. Maya didn't resent her. She understood her. But she didn't want to live that way anymore. She wanted a life built on choice, not obligation. The call that came weeks later was not a crisis. It was Ethan, calm and steady, telling her he'd passed an important exam and wanted her to know. Maya congratulated him, pride warm and uncomplicated. When the call ended, she didn't feel pulled back or torn in two. She felt connected in the way that mattered. She closed her laptop, looked around her small, carefully built space, and breathed easily. The chaos had not followed her. She had stepped out of it, and stayed out. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like something she had to endure. It felt like something she was actively shaping. Maya did not hear from Danielle again for several months. When she finally did, it came through Jordan, brief and factual. Danielle was struggling but stable. The baby was healthy. The household was quieter, leaner, functioning in a way it never had before. Maya felt no triumph in that news, only confirmation. Removing herself had not destroyed the family. It had forced it to rebalance. She sent clothes for the baby through Jordan and a book Lucy had been asking for, then returned to her work. She had learned that caring did not require proximity, and responsibility did not require surrender. The distance she maintained was not punishment. It was protection. That spring, Maya signed her first long-term contract with a regional company. The work was demanding and exacting, the kind that required focus she once believed she would never regain. She rented a slightly larger studio, set up a proper workspace, and stopped measuring her life against what she had escaped. She visited the children when schedules aligned, always on her terms. Ethan grew into his independence. Sophie talked about art school. Owen planned projects months in advance. Lucy still asked when Maya would visit next, but she no longer asked why she had left. The question had answered itself through consistency, not explanation. One evening, Maya locked her studio door after finishing a project and stood in the quiet hallway, keys warm in her hand. There was no emergency waiting, no apology required, no role she had to step back into. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Nothing urgent, just a joke he thought she'd appreciate. Maya smiled and replied as she walked out into the night. The life she had built was not loud or dramatic. It was stable. It was chosen. And it was hers. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving. It's choosing yourself without hating the people you love. Maya didn't walk away from her family, she stepped out of a role that was never meant to be hers. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.